Part 1. Where I'm Coming From. In Part 1 of Principles, Where I'm Coming From, Ray Dalio traces his life story from childhood to founding Bridgewater Associates in order to provide context about his core perspectives and principles. He reflects on pivotal experiences and encounters that shaped his thinking. Dalio describes his middle-class upbringing in Queens, New York in the 1950s and 60s. From early on, he was fascinated by understanding how things worked, including financial markets. He learned about global interconnectedness through his father, a jazz musician who also traded commodities. At age 12, Dalio bought his first stock and saw prices move based on world events. In high school, Dalio caddied at a golf club observing successful businessmen making impactful decisions. One key moment occurred when pondering his own mortality after almost getting hit by a car. This sparked Dalio to decide he didn't want to waste time pursuing meaningless work. He began seeking purpose and truth. Dalio shares how college and early jobs further shaped him. While studying finance at CW Post-College and working as director of commodities at Dominic & Dominic LLC, he dug deeply into global economic drivers of markets. Seeing unmet needs abroad and constraints at his firm, Dalio went off on his own as a trader. After early trading success, Dalio made overconfident bets that were disastrous when events like the 1985 Plaza Accord unfolded differently than he predicted. This failure taught him humility and spurred a quest to constantly learn and improve. After reflecting while working in Singapore and studying meditation, Dalio returned to found Bridgewater based on key principles like radical truthfulness and radical transparency. He believed bringing together disagreeing perspectives would reduce bias and yield better market predictions if done openly and non-emotionally. Dalio explains how in subsequent decades, Bridgewater grew rapidly while maintaining an idea meritocracy where decisions were made based on thoughts not status. Key was constant learning via feedback, not tolerating weaknesses, and thoughtful disagreement to surface the best solutions. Dalio admits this kind of transparent culture was difficult interpersonally at times. However, the meaningful mission attracted passionate employees. By grounding Bridgewater's unique practices in shared principles, they maintained coherence despite rapid expansion. By sharing his personal evolution from childhood curiosity to lessons from failures and eventually the crafting of Bridgewater's principles, Dalio provides readers crucial context about why he values truth, transparency, and meritocratic systems so highly based on his own life experiences. His journey led him to believe principles matter most in achieving goals at work and beyond. Part 2. Life Principles. In Part 2 of Principles, Ray Dalio outlines a series of life principles that provide guidance for decision-making, achieving goals, cultivating strong relationships, and finding purpose and success. He introduces core concepts like radical truth, radical transparency, believability-weighted decision-making, and meaningful work. Some of the key life principles that Ray Dalio outlines are: pursue radical truth and radical transparency. Dalio believes deeply in the power of honest truth. Seeking accurate understandings of reality in all areas of life, even when uncomfortable, allows one to make decisions grounded in facts rather than illusions. Similarly, Dalio calls for completely open and transparent communication with others. Admitting weaknesses and mistakes, seeking blunt feedback, and granting the same candidness to others drives personal growth by confronting blind spots head-on. While painful in the moment, this radical truthfulness builds trust and accountability. Dalio credits this relentless focus on truth as core to Bridgewater's idea meritocracy. Cultivate meaningful work. Dalio distinguishes meaningless work as being focused on chasing money above all else, while meaningful work fulfills an intrinsic purpose. Specifically, meaningful work meets three key criteria: it is goal-oriented rather than just activity for activity's sake, it leverages personal creativity rather than pure repetition, and it makes a positive contribution to society by producing something of value. Dalio argues that aligning one's professional pursuits with these elements rather than prioritizing compensation alone will lead to more fulfillment and impact. Embrace radical open-mindedness. Dalio stresses the fallibility of human judgment and the tendency for ego and emotion to distort decisions. He advocates countering this by radically opening oneself to the critiques and perspectives of others. Rather than defensively clinging to assumptions or opinions, analytically and non-judgmentally assess diverging views, being willing to evolve your own. Dalio says this intellectual openness to being wrong leads to personal growth. It requires patience and the maturity to divorce your ego from your beliefs. Understand your weaknesses and mistakes. Dalio emphasizes the importance of cultivating awareness of one's own flaws, gaps, and mistakes rather than being blind or defensive about them. He argues for analytically yet non-judgmentally studying your errors to diagnose why failures and setbacks occur. Without emotionality, reflect on weaknesses that may have contributed, as well as external factors. Map these diagnoses into principles for avoiding repeats down the line. Dalio stresses the fastest path to growth is acknowledging deficiencies and building systemic process to address them. Make believability-weighted decisions. When making decisions, Dalio advocates moving beyond intuition to engage in believability-weighted decision-making. This employs a systematic process where one carefully assesses the probability estimates and potential outcomes inherent to a decision, weighting each based on perceived credibility. After listing out all hypotheses, relevant data, and base rates, determine probabilistic weightings for each decision branch. The aim is to neutrally calculate which path has the highest cumulative believability rather than allowing emotion or ego to corrupt calculations. Balance reflection and intuition. Dalio advocates finding the right blend of thoughtful reflection and instinctual intuition when making decisions. Too much reflection can lead to overthinking and paralysis by analysis, while too much intuition can lead to careless mistakes. The ideal approach involves taking the time to consciously and objectively reflect on the decision at hand, weighing pros and cons and possible outcomes. But once sufficient reflection is complete, it's important to then listen to your intuitive gut feel about the best path forward. Both reflection and intuition have value in decision-making, and integrating them is more effective than choosing one over the other. Find meaningful work aligned to your values and talents. Dalio suggests reflecting deeply on your intrinsic motivators, values, and abilities to determine work pursuits that align to them. Carefully assessing what energizes you, what moral causes speak to you, and what talents differentiate you provides clarity for professional endeavors you will find meaningful. Dalio argues work driven primarily by leveraging your strengths and passions to contribute value rather than chasing compensation will unlock the greatest fulfillment and impact. Part 3. Work Principles. Dalio deeply emphasizes that meaningful work and meaningful relationships are absolutely critical for both a rewarding career and fulfilling life. Regarding meaningful work, Dalio specifies that it requires 1. Having an inspiring mission and purpose behind one's work that goes beyond solely making money. The professional mission should be bold, audacious, and lofty enough to intrinsically excite and motivate people to push themselves. It needs to tap into people's deeper desire to be part of something greater than themselves that creates real impact in the world. 2. Believing that the ambitious mission set out is actually achievable over the long term. This requires taking a historical perspective and thoroughly understanding cause-effect relationships, identifying what specifically needs to happen for the vision to become reality. People need to see believable pathways to success rather than just empty pipe dreams. Studying historical cases where similarly audacious missions were achieved builds conviction that with the right strategies and execution, the improbable becomes possible over time. 3. Being excited enough by the meaningful mission to fully commit and persevere through the many difficult obstacles and setbacks that will inevitably arise over the course of any ambitious undertaking. Passion and inspiration from the greater purpose, especially during the toughest of times, is what keeps people engaged and determined to keep progressing. The mission should tap into intrinsic motivations more powerful than just financial incentives. Likewise, meaningful relationships require openly and transparently sharing thoughts and building trust, rather than hiding weaknesses, doubts, or uncertainties out of fear of judgment. They involve wholly embracing concepts of radical truthfulness and radical transparency with colleagues rather than maintaining walls that inhibit authentic connection. Dalio emphasizes that through persistently having thoughtful disagreement conversations centered around understanding each other's reasoning rather than attacking, remarkably deep mutual understanding and respect can emerge surprisingly quickly. Principles for management and leadership. Moving on from relationships to execution, Dalio outlines what he views as the core principles for management and leadership. He summarizes that managers have two overarching responsibilities. 1. Achieving organizational goals and desired outcomes through other people. This starts by conveying expectations and priorities clearly, setting clear metrics to assess progress, monitoring outcomes rigorously, and finally distributing rewards and penalties judiciously based on results. Goals should be ambitious yet realistic, accompanied by well-designed measures to track if on course. There must be transparency around how rewards and promotions will be decided, so people understand success criteria. Outcomes speak for themselves. Managers must make sure positives are celebrated and shortfalls addressed promptly. 2. Evolving the organization through adaptation, creative destruction, and continuous improvement. This means persistently exploring disagreements, encouraging unconventional thinking without limits, and pushing innovation in processes. However, balanced controls and discipline must still be maintained to absorb only viable changes. Evolution requires the selection and reinforcement of beneficial new approaches, along with letting go of outdated assumptions and activities. Dalio also crucially points out key protocols for resolving conflicts through thoughtful disagreement conversations. He explains how to productively navigate sensitive topics to arrive at mutual understanding rather than resentment. Approaching ideological conflicts as curiosity conversations rather than attacks is critical. In terms of decision-making, Dalio describes techniques like the two-dot process that rigorously separate listing facts from proposing solutions to minimize confirmation bias and result in optimal choices. He also details tools like double-do loops and frequent iterations to continually revisit and refine decisions, learning from evidence if initial thinking should be updated. Organizational design and idea meritocracies. In a later section on organizational design, Dalio makes a strong case for the immense power of idea meritocracies, where the best concepts win out regardless of any individual's status or position in the hierarchy. He argues against status-based decision-making where the views of senior leaders override conflicting perspectives from lower levels or the front lines. Instead, he advocates for creating an evidence-based culture where reasoned arguments backed by facts carry the day over credentialed authority. Dalio also introduces the three-dot framework for thinking through how to balance creative freedom with coordination and controls across different units of an organization. The key is appropriately matching operating protocols and constraints to the function and current maturity level of each department. For example, strict oversight makes sense for inexperienced teams, while they will dampen innovation in expert units executing well-proven processes. No one-size-fits-all solution exists. Among other vital work principles covered, Dalio spotlights the immense value of thoughtful disagreement in reaching truth, the importance of constant improvement through rapid trial and error iterative learning, deeply understanding complex systems dynamics rather than linear causality, and balancing boldness with wise caution and risk-taking. He consistently emphasizes emotional objectivity in all aspects of work as the pathway to produce the best long-term results rather than reactive decisions. Dalio's 5-step process for achieving goals. Towards the end of Part 3, Dalio consolidates all the work principles into a streamlined 5-step process that he views as most critical for successfully achieving goals. 1. Clearly identify the specific goals and vision to be achieved. Define the problem to be solved or objectives to accomplish without ambiguity. 2. Perceive the key problems and obstacles both inside and outside the organization that stand in the way of being able to achieve those goals as quickly as desired. Obstacles must be surfaced before they can be addressed. 3. Accurately diagnose why each of those problems exists in order to get at the true underlying root causes. If the root causes are incorrectly understood, then solutions will fail to resolve the issue sustainably. Dalio advocates using the 5 whys framework of asking deeper questions about assumptions. 4. Thoughtfully design and then vigorously execute solutions aimed specifically at the root causes behind each problem. Iteratively adapt approaches based on empirical feedback until the right solutions are found through trial and error. 5. Repeat this overall process continuously to keep advancing towards the goals and vision. New challenges will emerge over time that require the next round of learning and adaptation to overcome. Progress unlocks new realms of possibility that allow reframing more ambitious goals to pursue next. Dalio makes an extremely strong case that applying this 5-step process with excellence over and over is the fundamental key to succeeding in any endeavor and continuing to reach new heights over decades. Without it, organizations stagnate as they hit limits they fail to properly perceive and diagnose. But done well, it enables remarkable achievement. In summary, Part 3 provides immensely practical advice and principles for management, decision-making, organizational design and personal development so that one can reach their full potential and do truly great things. Everything connects back to the pursuit of meaningful work and relationships as part of the good life.